Hi there. The funny thing about life coaching is that I never know exactly how I'm going to help somebody, but I have every reason to believe that coaching people is going to make a huge difference in their lives. So, getting started right now, I want to share with you some tools that have been the keys to me being able to actually finish graduate school. Where I've been for the past 3 years has been kind of a position of being stuck. And I say for the past 3 years because I have had one project on my mind that entire time. And I am finally able to finish it now because of what I'm about to teach you. And first, I want to explain exactly what I think was the reason I couldn't finish the project before. The project I'm talking about is my dissertation to finish grad school. All of my coursework is done. I've done all that. I was able to get through, muscle through all my classes, all of my recitals, all the concerts, all the hours of practice, all the lessons. I did all that, and finally what got me stuck was the dissertation, and I needed a new way of looking at things to be able to actually finish this paper, because doing the actual work wasn't the problem. The real problem was whenever I would start to do the work, my mind would race. I would have very strong emotions that prevented me from being able to focus. I would feel sick, nauseated. I would be basically in mental and emotional anguish over this project. And the reasons for having that kind of struggle are going to be different for everybody. And I'm not saying that I have a solution that is going to fix problems overnight. I mean, I'm going to be totally upfront. I'm not done with the project yet, and it's still a work in progress, but I feel so much better about it that I'm ready to share exactly what it is that has helped me. So that's probably long enough of an introduction. So the tool that I want to share is basically understanding your own thoughts and feelings. And to do that, it's really important to recognize what circumstances are. Circumstance is everything outside of your mind. Circumstance is where you're at. It's the people around you. It's it's your job. It's your, you know, all the world. And I know this doesn't sound very groundbreaking. You might not hear anything groundbreaking in this video yet, but don't be deceived by how simple it is. Circumstance is neutral. Circumstance has good and bad. It always has, it always will. That's the world we live in. That's called being human, being mortal. There's good and bad no matter what your circumstance is. The way our minds work, we like to label things. We like to put things in categories. And when we look around at ourselves and we experience sort of a negative emotion or have a negative thought, the mind very readily attaches that to circumstance. And I'm not telling you it's wrong to have an opinion. I'm not saying that your judgment of whether a circumstance is safe or unsafe, or whether a circumstance is, you know, should be preferred or not preferred, I'm not saying that your judgment in those cases is off. In fact, I think these tools are going to help you focus your judgment and be even better at choosing whatever you think is best no matter what the circumstance is. So I'm not trying to flip any worldviews you have, other than saying think of the breadth of possibility and circumstance and recognize that there always will be good and bad, and be aware of what your mind focuses on. Because where we get into the idea of opinion is in the world of thought. Circumstances being neutral means that they're boring, they're factual. Thought gets to be a place where you get to choose whatever you want, because thought is inside your own mind. The way this changes things for me is once I was able to recognize how the circumstance I was in was neutral and that I could think whatever I want within that circumstance, it helped me to identify the thoughts that weren't helping me in that circumstance. Part of the reason that I've struggled for so long were the stories that I was telling myself about the circumstances that I was in. The story that I tell myself about the circumstances has nothing to do with the circumstance and has everything to do with my thoughts. And what I mean by that is when I choose a thought and my mind starts to pick it up and turn it into a story, it's going to gather proof for whatever thought that is. And it can gather proof for the good, or it can gather proof for the bad. It can gather proof for the fantasies. It can gather proof for the nightmares. Your mind is very powerful in terms of creating a story that achieves the result, or achieves the perspective that it thinks will be good for you. What thoughts also do are lead to feelings. And just for the sake of explaining this tool, I keep it as simple as possible. So it is possible that, maybe sometimes you have a feeling and you don't know exactly what thought it was, but it's not really that important to be exactly correct, or to be able to prove, yes, I know exactly that this thought led to this feeling. What this is doing is giving your mind a tool to create more space around the stories that you're using in your mind. So feelings start to give power, they start to give traction to the stories that are created in your thoughts, and they kind of are integrating your thoughts with the circumstance around you. So the tool that I want you to create as a result of this video is awareness. Just being aware that your thoughts are interacting with circumstances all the time. And the stories that you're telling in your head are about the circumstances. They're not the circumstance themselves. And the stories that you're telling, they are created in your thoughts. They're not created by the circumstance. Because remember, the circumstance is neutral. The circumstance is boring. It's factual. Thoughts are where you get to have opinions. So, how many thoughts can you prove in a court of law? And why is that important? It's important because your mind doesn't necessarily get concerned with facts. Your mind doesn't necessarily get concerned with seeing everything through best judgment and with 100% accuracy. It wants to reinforce the story that you already believe. It wants to be right. It wants to avoid pain. It wants to seek pleasure and feeling good. It wants you to stay alive. And it does the very best it can with all of the facts it has on hand. And awareness is really built up through using this tool. So just to kind of wrap up this video, I was thinking this past month, I'd had several conversations with a friend about the dissertation and realized one of the ideas that had been holding me back was I felt like my committee totally missed the point, but I didn't really know how to put that point into the paper itself. I wanted to talk about the intrinsic value of art and connect that to my project, and it just felt like too big of a topic to address in a paper like mine. Because I'd already done so much research, I didn't want to have to go back and read several books to be able to validate the argument that I was making. And I wrote a couple pages anyway, bringing up this feeling that I had that made me feel very vulnerable, and it was very difficult. And in my mind, the story was my advisor's going to read this and he's just going to tell me to cut it. So why show it to him at all? I mean, it felt good just writing it, but should I really show it to him? Because it's probably a waste of my time. But I recognized that was a story in my head. It made me feel vulnerable. It made me feel scared. It made me feel like my advisor was going to shut me down. That was the story in my head. But I knew I hadn't let him prove to me what would really happen. I didn't know that he would prove the story in my head right. I was willing to let him prove the story in my head wrong. I was willing to think that possibly my greatest fears might just be that they might just be a story in my head, and I might be holding myself back by not sharing with him these 2 pages. And when I actually did, and when he read it, he told me, Rob, this is what we've been looking for. You need to expand these ideas. You need to put them in the introduction into every chapter. And this is what validates your research. This is what makes this paper important. And this is what brings it all together. And I almost couldn't even believe the response that he gave to me in that moment. Like I even just hearing him say that, I was sort of in shock because I thought that is impossible. Like there was sort of a voice in my head that said, this is what I want the paper to be about, but they would never buy that from me. They would never listen to me talk about this kind of thing. And now my advisor says this is exactly what we need in this paper. And so that was an incredible experience. And this tool, just the idea of separating circumstance from thoughts, identifying thoughts as being totally optional, totally, you're free to experiment with whatever thought you want, and allowing yourself that space to recognize Thoughts are a place where you can dream. Thoughts are a place where you can see anything you want. You can be unreasonable. You can be reasonable. You can be anywhere with your thinking. And as adults, we kind of get stuck in this little box all the time. And part of it is we're just holding on to these stories we have. And with this tool, you don't have to just tear down your whole story and rewrite it from the ground up. You can just focus on one little thing. Just focus on one little thought. I'm going to talk more about how to apply this model in the future. If you want to go ahead and do more research about it before I get around to making those videos, I recommend looking up Brooke Castillo. She's the founder of the Life Coach School. I also recommend Jody Moore. She owns a program called Be Bold and has a podcast called Better Than Happy. Let's see, Brooke Castillo's podcast. It's either, oh shoot, what's it called? Just let me look that up here. Brooke Castillo. Yeah, the Life Coach School podcast. I thought that's the name of it, but I wasn't sure. It just like, anyways, that's it for this video. I have so much hope and excitement for you to use this model in your life. I have barely scratched the surface of it, but just knowing that much, if you just let this idea plant a seed, you'll be amazed at what it can do for you. So, you know how YouTube works. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.